Hi everyone, my name is Nikhil Jadon and I would like to present a case study for subject BA 668. I chose the case study from the chapter 10, which is a job at East Yard Company. In this case study, we will discuss how the 401k overall works. So in this case study, we have a subject who is 22-year-old and a recent college graduate. Recently, he got a job offer from a East Yard Company and the company offered him $50,000 as annual salary. Finance team explained him that if he opened the 401k account with the company and contributed $3,000, suppose, then the company will match the dollar to dollar value until the 5% of his salary, which will be $2,500. This is the contribution that will be deducted from his salary as a pre-tax amount. So the tax base will change and he only have to pay a tax on $47,000 in place of $50,000. In this case, the total 401k sum would be $5,500, which include the $3,000 contribution from the employee and a $2,500 contribution from the employer. So let's talk about certain matching types and ER interpretation in this slide. So generally, companies do offer different types of matching options, such as partial match, where they only match the certain value or percentage of total employee contribution. The next is dollar to dollar match, where they match the contribution to 100% with the employee's contribution. And the last one is the non-matching contribution, where the company is just committed to certain amount irrespective of employee's contribution. In this case study, we are assuming it's a dollar to dollar match up to 5%. And if an employee invested $2,500 in 401k, then employer will also contribute $2,500, with which is 100% of the total amount. Let's talk about the EAR over here. EAR stands for effective annual interest rate. It's a rate of interest which investor can earn in a year from his capital investment. So let's take an example over here. In this example, if employee contributed $10 over here and employer also invested $10, then the total value of the investment would be $20. If the cost of the share in $20, if cost of the share happened to be $20 after some time, then the EAR on the stock would be 100%. So there is a calculation over here which has been given as an example. And apparently, if the ER is 100%, then the matching is good, and the investor is getting the return of 100% on the investment in the stock. So in this slide, we talk about how 401k is the best tax saving and investment instrument, and how much a 20-year-old can accumulate by investing in 401k until the age of 65. Suppose if person is contributing $3,000 in 401k, then he can save up to $360 in tax annually, considering his annual salary is $50,000. Also, I would like to set an example here where you can see that how employee can save up to $3.2 million by the age of 65 if he started the 6% salary contribution to 401k. In this example, I'm considering the employee is contributing 6% of his salary and the employer, on the other hand, matching dollar to dollar up to 5%. And the total salary is $50,000, of course. Also, I'm assuming that the expected salary increase is 3% annually, along with the annual return of 6%. Also, I'm considering the expected inflation rate as 3%. So we can see in this example how 401k can do a miraculous saving for any employee, and it could be a best tax saving instrument as well. So in this case study, we have given a couple of investment options to which your 401k contribution will be invested upon. First option is company stock. It's a privately held company with price defined by board each year. The other options are Bledsoe S&P 500 index fund, Bledsoe small cap fund, Bledsoe large company stock fund, Bledsoe bond fund, Bledsoe money market fund. So every fund has a different AAR, different risk, volatility, and various other pros and cons, which we will discuss further. So what advantage do mutual funds offer compared to the company's stock? Mutual funds are portfolio of assets where you can purchase the partial ownership of entire portfolio of the fund. This diversification provides protection as your retirement funds are not based solely on the performance of one company as it would be with the company stocks. If one company underperforms in a mutual fund, the other stocks can offset the losses. If you only invest in a company's stocks, your portfolio depends on its performance alone. Mutual funds are professionally managed by the companies compared to the company stocks. The risk is shared by the common pool of investors that are investing in the pool. It's also convenient to transfer from one fund to another one. So in this slide, we compared the large company stock fund versus S&P 500 index fund. So the large fund has advantage since they are historically stable, safe with a lower risk, high liquidity, potential dividend payment. Companies are well researched, and a lot of institutional holdings are there. There are certain disadvantage as well, the lack of flexibility, and there are no big gains. For the index fund, the advantages are low risk, steady growth. There's a very low fee, and some funds have a tax advantages as well, and there is instant diversification if you need. And there are certain disadvantages as well for the index funds, which is a lack of downside protection if the market is falling. There's a lack of reactive ability if the market is very volatile. There's no control over the holdings if you wanted to invest in certain stocks, which doesn't fall under that index. And there's a very limited exposure to different strategies because this is index based and you don't have much control to it. So in this slide, we will compare the Bledsoe Large Company Stock Fund to Bledsoe S&P 500 Index Fund. The advantage of selecting the Bledsoe Large Company Stock Fund compared to the Bledsoe S&P 500 Index Fund is with the fund being actively managed by the Ivan Bledsoe. It has outperformed the market in 6 of the last 8 years. Further, while the S&P index fund purchases is based on the index, Bledsoe can research and make the best investment decision for the fund based on all available information in the market. However, the major disadvantage in selecting the Bledsoe large company stock is expense fee, which can easily cost hundreds of thousands of dollars over the 30 years of time. Arguably, the another major disadvantage of this fund is being managed by the Bledsoe. Since the market are believed to be efficient, it is not advantageous to have the fund manager when compared to using a passively managed index fund. Warren Buffett famously placed and won a 10-year bet betting results from an index fund against an actively managed fund. So in this slide, we talk about these small cap funds. So small cap funds are the funds who traded and invest in the small companies. And generally the small company is a public company whose total market value and the market capitalization is about 300 million to $2 billion. So small cap investors are generally looking for upcoming young companies that are growing fast and they are looking for they have a potential to become a large caps of the future. Small cap stocks historically have outperformed large cap stocks, but are also more volatile and riskier. So being a young investor, why would I invest in Bledsoe small cap fund? As with the funds of this nature, the Bledsoe small cap funds is very volatile because of the size and the location of the companies. But with this volatility typically comes with great reward. There are more upside and potential to grow for smaller companies, but not without a high risk which causes the fund to be volatile. This high risk, high reward model typically provide the highest return of the mutual fund. If you're a recent college graduate and just beginning your career with a and you have roughly 30 years of saving ahead, the high return is very beneficial and you can gain as much as possible and still have the ample time to recover if any losses occur in the market fluctuation. So the expense fee is very expensive and would affect the decision. But the ultimately, since I'm the young investor and I would consider those returns are highly substantial, that I would consider this my investment to be invested in the Blackstone small cap fund, and they would well enough to cover the additional expenses or on annual basis. So I would suggest to I would go with the Blackstone small cap fund to invest the money. So before investing in any fund, we have to understand what is the Sharpe ratio. So the Sharpe ratio is a very appropriate for these assets. That's the measure of risk adjusted return. These funds, as well as the stocks, vary in their investment strategies and associated risks. The Sharpe ratio helps you to better understand what risk return to expect for each fund related to a small overall risk, which in this case are very different. The higher ratio indicate the better return in the relation of the risk taken. So in this slide, you can see there are certain calculations on which you can see the Sharpe ratio is quite higher in the bond fund, and and it's quite low in the company's stock. So as an investor, if I go by the Sharpe ratio, I would highly recommend to invest in the bond fund. But considering the age of the investor, I'm considering if the investor is 22 years old and he has a plenty of time ahead, so he can always go for those small cap funds as well. If you are in your 20s, I guess that I would put my 40% of the fund in the Bledsoe small cap fund, and 30% of the fund in the large company fund, and 50% in the company stock, and the 15% in the S&P index fund. In my 30s, I would change my strategy, and I would put 30% in Bledsoe small cap fund, 30% in the large company fund, 10% S&P index fund, and 30% in the Bledsoe bond fund, because I would the add my exposure to the bonds in my 30s. In my 40s and 50s, I would invest 60 to 70% of my fund in the large cap stock funds and the 30 to 40% in the bonds. Similarly, in my 50s and 60s, actually, I would put 60 to 70% in the large cap stock fund, and 40 to 50% in the bond. So as I grow older, my more I would go with more with the bonds as compared to the stock market or large cap funds.